to start by asking this question about why we continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. And we're all guilty of this at some point in our lives and with some aspect of our lives. Yet we will complain and we will criticize and even blame. But rarely do we ever do anything different to alter our stories. And we all have a story, one that is built or deeply rooted in our childhood conditioning and experiences. When it comes to money specifically, what we think, how we feel, and why we behave the way we do ultimately determines our financial success. But sadly, many who have a negative relationship with money will never do anything different to alter their stories. And not for a lack of knowledge or resources available to them, but simply because they lack the awareness or it is just too damn hard to do the work to transform their beliefs. Today, I will share 4 simple questions that we can use to rethink some common beliefs around money. But first, I'd like to share a part of my story with you. I remember lying on the bathroom floor, feeling overwhelmed by a great deal of sadness, bawling my eyes out, whilst one hand held the weight of my head, the other held a blade. How did I get here? I had just found out that I had passed matric and I would be the first in my family to be able to study at a university. Now, this was a big deal for us considering the disruptive circumstances in which I grew up in. And passing signified hope. We all know that our final year at school is the gateway to adulthood and a step towards financial independence. If you are lucky to be born under the right financial circumstances, then the world could be your oyster. But if you are dealt a shitty deck of cards, well, then the road ahead was going to be a lot tougher. I was fortunate in that I was born into a wealthy home. But by the time I was 8, my father would leave. And in that process, we went from having wealth to having nothing. My childhood experience led me to want to become a child psychologist. I guess in some way it would help me to heal from the trauma that I experienced growing up as a child of divorce, alcoholism, abandonment, and gender based violence. Now you'll understand why passing matric was such a big deal. I thought I could defy my circumstances. But once the dust of the excitement of passing settled and the reality of the future kicked in, I became despondent. You see, the only thing standing between me and my dream was money, or the lack thereof. I hadn't bothered to apply for any student loans or bursaries. Why? Because I had become conditioned to focus on problems and not solutions. I did eventually complete my degree part time, and the 10 years it took me also gained me a PhD in self pity and excusitis. And so, whilst I did not realize my dream of becoming a psychologist, my journey did lead me down a completely different path. Studying psychology was the first sign of how our childhood conditioning impacts our behavior as adults. And if we did not resolve those challenges, then they would continue to show up in our life, in our relationships, with our money, and ultimately with our success, which, by the way, is largely dependent on the stories we tell ourselves. You know what I'm talking about, that voice inside your head that bullshits you into believing whether you can or can't. And we all have that voice. But the difference between those who achieve success and those who don't is when they choose to listen to that voice. And the same applies to our financial success, with the main culprits being our thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and behavior. But if we can learn to channel this in a positive manner, then we have the power to shift how we think, how we feel, and ultimately how we behave with our money. In his book, The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel says that people do some crazy ass things with money, but no one is crazy. Okay, obviously he doesn't say ass, but he does say that a child that is born into poverty will view risk and reward very differently from that of someone who is born into wealth, which explains why those of us with a scarcity mindset are predisposed to believe that life is hard and we will never be wealthy and rich people suck. And so we resign from taking positive action, just like I did with not applying for a student loan or a bursary, because the standard by which we have become so accustomed to is why bother? My accidental career in financial planning led me down a path of wanting to improve my relationship with money. And when I discovered that if I moved from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, I realized that the world could still be my oyster. And I wish everyone knew this. I wish everyone knew this and would stop ignoring the signs of how money or the lack thereof can either build or destroy families' hopes and dreams. So if we want to make money matter, if we want to make money really matter, then we need to stop and ask ourselves these four simple questions. Number one, how do we earn money? Parents are still putting unnecessary pressure on their children to follow certain career paths, to study certain professions, or to work in the family business. When this is forced, it leads them down a destructive path of having little to no joy for what they do, never realizing their true potential or living their most authentic and purposeful lives. And we know that this can have an impact on our emotional well being, which can lead them to tragic consequences later on in life. Number two, how and if we are saving. My conversations with parents highlight the extent of their antiquated traditional ways of thinking when it comes to saving and investing. Phrases like, don't do this, do that, invest here, oh, it's too risky, what if you lose, what if you fail? Whilst we want to protect our children from making financial mistakes at all costs, we also need to be open to the idea of exploring alternative ways of thinking when it comes to saving and investing. Number three, how do we spend our money? Not practicing what we are telling them is important is hypocrisy at its highest level. Don't do what I do, rather what I say. And we're all guilty of this, me included. Why? Because change is hard and it's easier to always do what we've always done. And, instilling these beliefs in our children is our attempt of resolving the faults of our ways. Which leads me to my final question. How do we give? We were raised in an era where we were learned to define love with doing. The more we love, the more we do. But are we doing the right thing? Spoiling our children, buying them things, never saying no, to ease our guilty conscience and relive the childhood experience that we didn't get to live is examples of how we are doing it wrong. Instead of enabling them, we should also be empowering them. Instead of merely providing the resources, we should also be teaching them how to be resourceful. Our answers to these questions will tell us where the problems are, what it is we need to fix, change, or redefine. And so, whilst we continue to do the great work we do for our clients and their money, I want to remind you of the bigger picture here. We not only have a responsibility to protect our clients' generational wealth, we also have a responsibility, a social responsibility, to ensure that we are breaking generational cycles that are keeping people stuck in old patterns of behavior. So let us change the narrative. Let us change the narrative by changing their stories and making money really matter. Thank you.